is Ethan Iowa Baseball. Thanks for your patience.
Ethan was born on October 25th, 2010. He was 7 pounds 2 ounces and 21 inches long. So we got sent home, and Ethan wasn't really latching on well. I had to go to the lactation consultant a couple times right after we had gotten home, and then that next morning. And I ended up at Firelands Regional Medical Center emergency room with him because he was very lethargic, wasn't latching on, wasn't getting nutrition, and at the time we didn't notice this, but he actually wasn't stooling. So needless to say, after trip to the ER, then being released, then another trip to the ER, then being released by October 31st, 2010, we were manuvaced up to Rainbow Babies and Children's Hospital. Ethan was taken to the NICU, where he was greeted by 20,000 different doctors, it felt like, at that point in time. And as a new mom, for me, it was just so hard because they kind of pushed me away and just started, running tests, doing different things to him. And within about an hour, they came back and said that he had Hirschsprung's disease, which was something that I had never heard of before in my entire life. And they explained it to me pretty simply, that basically a portion of his intestines while he was in utero never developed, and so it was like a rubber band was wrapped around them, and so he couldn't stool. So then they told me that there were a couple different options, but he was so malnourished at that point that he needed to gain weight, he needed to thrive before they were able to do any procedures. So in my mind, what I thought was going to be maybe a week or so stay turned into about a month and a half. Ethan had to have rectal enemas every single day, and it was something that they required for myself to learn, and I had to do those to him, which he ended up developing what's called enterocolitis. So that then put his surgery back even further, which was why we were there for almost a month and a half. And what they thought was going to be a one-time surgery for him because he was so malnourished turned into a colostomy bag surgery instead of what they were going to do, which was a reanastomosis, where they would take that portion of his intestine out completely and then reattach it. So for a child that was literally a month and some odd days old, he had a colostomy bag, and I had to, kind of learn how to take care of him and take care of that. He was put on special formula for dairy allergy, and he also had acid reflux, so that was also another thing. So this process for me, went from giving birth to a child, thinking that I was going to be able to take him home, take him out to the store, take him, to the mall and show him off, and, do things that typical newborn moms do. And instead I got to spend a month and a half up at Rainbow with him. Then jumping forward to when Ethan was 18 months, he was actually diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder. He had to undergo a series of what they call ADOS tests. Those were pretty lengthy and extensive. We had Help Me Grow involved in our home from pretty much the time that Ethan came home with the colostomy bag until this point, and they had seen signs and symptoms of developmental delays. He wasn't crawling, he wasn't walking, he wasn't talking the way that he should have been. And so they had suggested for us to do that test in the home, which we did. Came back that there was some speculation of autism spectrum disorder, and then we went back up to Rainbow to have the test done by the actual physician in the developmental department, and it did come back that he was autism spectrum disorder candidate. He was high on the spectrum, so that meant that he would develop, and he would have be able to vocalize things. He would have some socialization abilities, but that he would definitely have some disabilities with those as well. Age 3, Ethan was sent back up to the Developmental Institute at Rainbow Babies and Children's Hospital for a reevaluation of the autism spectrum disorder and to kind of see where he was at with all of that, and if there were any changes and or additional diagnoses that needed to be made. So they redid the test on him, that ADOTS test, and he still was, in the same category. And then they also determined that he suffered from severe separation anxiety and socialization anxiety, which really kind of wasn't a big surprise to us because we had seen it in the home and we had kind of experienced it out in public. He was very quick to run behind me, if he needed to. When he saw someone that was unfamiliar to him, he, had a lot of stemming that he did. He would make train noises all the time, like woo woo, and he would just do that all day long. And that was his way of saying that he was maxed out. And so that, was a huge thing that we saw with anxiety. Anytime that he had an anxiety episode, he would just start going woo 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 woo. And after about 2 seconds of hearing that, as I'm sure you can imagine, a mom just kind of wants to crawl in a cave by herself and never hear the sound of a train again. But it was just something that we lived with and we dealt with, and we tried to redirect him and do, different things with him to kind of get his mind off of that. Sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't, but we just kind of, lived every day, day by day. Also at the age of 3, Ethan did start preschool at Huron City Schools at Shawnee Elementary, and he did get put on an IEP. That is a intervention program for children with developmental disabilities, any medical issues, and or just delays in their academics. And so the big thing on there was obviously his autism spectrum disorder, as well as the social anxiety. And so that just kind of gave him additional services at school. He was able to not only get speech outside of school, but also within, which really helped him develop the wide range vocabulary that he has today. He was also able to get occupational therapy, which aided in his stemming and kind of the autism spectrum disorder in itself, just giving him the ability to release all of that energy and, I guess, chaos that was building up inside of him every day when he was in an environment and situation that he wasn't comfortable. They did several additional tests on him this year, kind of aiding. He was able to graduate speech. So he can talk just like you or I can talk at this point. A lot of people tell me that when they do talk to him, it's almost like they're talking to a mini adult, because he is just so far beyond his age when it comes to his way of speaking. So that was one of the positive things that came from this past year. Unfortunately, there were some negatives with Ethan. And kind of what we were told at the beginning of all this was that, autism spectrum disorder is definitely a diagnosis, but with that does come a lot of other diagnoses over time. So that would, make sense with the anxiety and now this new diagnosis that Ethan got when he was 5. Treatment didn't start till he was 6, but when he was 5, he was diagnosed with cyclic vomiting syndrome. And just a quick description of what that is essentially his body gets so anxious and so worked up over the most microscopic thing. It could be a pencil out of line or green beans next to his green peas, and that would just send him into almost like a panic attack. But for him, his version of a panic attack would be he would get sick and he would throw up. repeatedly. We're talking 6 to 12 times in an hour span. And at that point, he would completely exhaust his entire body to the point where he would sleep for then 16 to 25 hours after that. And it kind of happened very nonchalantly. We didn't really understand what was going on. We thought maybe he had some motion sickness or something like that, because we did take him to Disney World last year, and that was when we experienced the first episode, but we didn't know it at that time. And he had gotten off the plane, he did great. We were so excited that he was, happy and go lucky and didn't have any worries about, traveling, because that would have been his first time on a plane. We got to the first park and he threw up all over the place, and then he slept the rest of the day, so that was kind of out of the whole entire first day shot, but it was totally fine. And so then when we got back from our trip, he actually went 2 weeks without throwing up, and then after that he did it for 2 weeks solid. And at that point we consulted with his gastroenterologist, and she had stated that she felt that he was definitely a cyclic vomiting syndrome candidate. He went through some testing and different things, and he was diagnosed and treated when he was 5 into 6. And so that has been kind of our biggest hurdle this year with Ethan. Looking at him, you wouldn't know that anything's wrong with him. You wouldn't know that he had surgery when he was not even, a full month old. You wouldn't know that he really has autism spectrum disorder. You wouldn't know that he is anxious around you. You wouldn't know that he suffers from any of these issues, really, unless you spent an extensive amount of time with him. He is, the light of my life, and he has been such a true blessing. But he definitely struggles, and he struggles from within, and he's just such a joy to be around. He brings out the kid in me that, I miss so much. He brings out, the best in anybody.
My favorite place to go is Walt Disney World, Kings Island, and Cedar Point. Thanks for your patience.
I had several conversations with Ethan's surgeon. His name is Dr. Barksdale, and he is just an amazing man. He sat me down one day when things were really bad with Ethan, when he was, initially malnourished, and, he was fighting for his life, and, the nurses were taking over, and I wasn't able to be, the mom that I wanted to be even up there. And he looked at me and he said, that we are not family by choice. We are family by circumstance. And the reason why your son is here and the reason why your son is going to make it is because of the choices that you made to get him here. That motherly instinct is something that should never be doubted, should never be taken for granted, and should never be turned down. And I truly believe to this day that my motherly instinct that I didn't even really know that I had at the time is what has brought Ethan to where he is today, what has made him the little boy that he is today, and all the fighting that I did for him and all the advocating that I did for him when he was not able to do so for himself, has all paid off and is continuing to pay off and give him as normal, if there is anything normal, of a life that is possible. And so my message to any mother now, any future mother, is never doubt that, because it's very real, it's very much there, and it definitely